Hello and welcome to this round 2 of Grand Prix Brussels. Tim Willoughby here alongside Raphael Levy. On the left of our screen there you can see Vincent Manohua, and he's up against Don Van Ravensway. Where there's a unified will, there's a Ravensway, and I believe that he is going to be on a similar deck to one that we saw last round in the mono-blue Paradoxical Outcome Storm deck. But on the other side of things, it's the deck that you mentioned, Raph Levy. This is our Turbo Fog deck. Why do we call it Turbo Fog? Well, first up, it's got a whole bunch of fog effects to stop attacking. And then the turbo side of it is that it's drawing extra cards to get to those fogs. And the way that it's drawing extra cards, principally here, is it's getting to take extra turns with Nexus of Fate.
So in this matchup, we have Turbo Fog on the left side and Mono Blue Storm on the right side. Not favorable for Turbo Fog in game one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that typically if you're playing a deck full of fogs, you kind of want to have a little bit of aggression on the other side so that those fogs can have the sort of maximum impact. Here it is that there's a little bit more aggression, a little bit more attacking from this Mono Blue Storm list than there would have been in previous iterations, because Psy Master Thopterist does give this deck quite a different set of lines of attack. But here we see the first little fracard here. Supreme Will on one side, dealing with Inspiring Statuary. The Statuary really does power up a lot of what this Mono Blue Storm deck's trying to achieve.
Supreme Will is a pretty good card in these in this situation, because, well, you can counter one of the key spells in Turbo Fog, and also you can find either Fog or Teferi that are very important in the Turbo Fog strategy.
Yeah, dig, dig, dig is definitely order of the day a lot of the time. Sometimes you see that from the likes of Search for Ascanter, but Supreme Will do it. But there we see Inspiring Statuary as well, and that does mean that all of the non-artifact spells in your deck have Improvise, and given so many artifacts in the Mono Blue Storm list, it means that casting a ton of spells in one turn, very straightforward, at which point your Aetherflux Reservoir can finish things off quite nicely.
So Vincent played his Gift of Paradise on turn 4 to power up a Teferi next turn. He had the choice of playing Karn as well. So jamming Karn might have been a good option here as well. So he could have found the fifth land to play Teferi. The gift is not actually necessary this turn, but I can see why he played it. So he has more mana available when he plays Teferi to untap 2 lands.
Now we see a Karn on the other side of the battlefield here. Don Van Ravensway, he's trying to achieve something a little bit different with his Karns than the Turbo Fog player. Because he's got so many artifacts, when he's making constructs by removing 2 loyalty from Karn, those constructs get pretty large relatively quickly. Already this construct a 2/2, and reasonable to assume it's going to get even bigger. For Turbo Fog, at least in the early stages of the game, that Karn is mainly just about making sure that you can keep your card drawing going. So along comes Teferi. Step 1, let's draw a card. We'll get to untap a land, or untap 2 lands, sorry, and untapping a land with Gifts of Paradise on it just means that there's tons of mana available to Vincent even after he has tapped out for a Planeswalker.
The strategy Don is taking here, making constructs to actually attack with damage, is the strategy that is preferred from the Turbo Fog point of view. You want your opponent to attack. The way you lose this matchup on the Turbo Fog side is when they go off with Reservoir, and you have no real ways to stop it. If they start attacking, you can just fog your way into the longer game when you have a more efficient plan.
Yeah, it's interesting here. Don may be better placed to play the slow game and just hope to eke it out with card advantage. As things stand, his Prophetic Prism draws him a card, so that one's sort of net neutral, and it does pump his construct. Now comes a Renegade map, so now there's 4 artifacts already in play, and another construct being made by Karn here. So Don doing a pretty good job of creating big creatures to pressure Vincent, but he does have these Fog's main decks so that he may end up being able to deal with this line of attack fairly easily.
So there was a play that Vincent missed, maybe because he's not necessarily familiar with this matchup, was to fog during upkeep.
Interesting.
Because the only thing that Vincent is fearing here is a 5/5 construct. But Don would have needed to play artifacts and actually pay for them. And he has Metallic Rebukes in his deck. So during upkeep, that forces him to tap lands and one of his Prism, and doesn't make his mana as available as it could have been.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very nuanced play. I don't think that you need to both be familiar with your deck and the matchup to be able to see that one coming, but a nice option when you think of it. And so here's Charter Course. No creatures to attack with right now, so that's just draw 2, discard 1. But we find another copy of Supreme Will there, so Vincent, he will have access to more counter magic, though I think that he's, well, at least for now, he's not going to be getting too far on his taking extra turns plan, though he probably will be able to get another Fog here and potentially even another Planeswalker down if he wants it.
At this point, he doesn't really need to take the extra turns. He's not facing a Sai that allows the the Storm player to go wide, and he has a counter spell to counter an outcome, a paradoxical outcome.
So it's Khans on both sides, but where Don's Khan is all about drawing, is all about creating constructs, Vincent only really cares about making sure that he draws cards, at least for now. There's an island going to hand, and Sertry's counter exiled with a silver counter on it. It's sat underneath Khan to potentially be drawn on a future turn.
Right. Did he not play land this turn? No, he did not play land this turn. Did he? Oh, he might have played the forest, right? Last turn he played Teferi. So yeah, he did play land.
So Don here. This is kind of, we're hitting the frustration stage of playing against Fog, and realistically, almost every game with the Fog deck, sooner or later, you find this of just having to hope that they don't have it. Each turn that Don is going for an attack step here, if there is some sort of a Fog effect, it ends pretty poorly for him. If there isn't, it's kind of great. And as things stand, this particular build of Turbo Fog's kind of weird because classically, Turbo Fog would have loads of card drawing, potentially even Howling Minds and similar, so that both players are drawing cards, and lots of Fog effects. This one, it doesn't need to have quite as many Fogs as some of the Turbo Fog decks we've seen in the past.
You need just enough Fogs to go off. At some point, you'll have Nexus of Fate to take extra turns, and you will never need a Fog anymore because, well, your opponent will never attack you again.
Jalfrin Void there coming down, just allowing a scry. Given that the deck is mono blue, the Storm list doesn't really hurt for having to play a few non-island lands.
Yeah, at this point, a Metallic Rebuke on Don's side would probably win the game because he would counter a Fog effect and effectively kill both Planeswalkers. At this point, the constructs are 5/5s, but any artifact make them 6/6, and a Fog would just protect both Planeswalkers. A counter on the Fog would mean both Planeswalkers are dead.
So Aetherflux Reservoir being cast here by Don. So this both pumps up the constructs and means that his sort of secondary win condition, if you will, is now live, assuming it resolves.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah,
this one can resolve.
I guess that the challenge is, do you have a Fog? If you have a Fog, then I'm kind of like letting the reservoir resolve so that you can protect both your Planeswalkers. As things stand, there's an Ornithopter, and this is enough to really punish that line of play. 2 gigantic constructs, killing off both Planeswalkers, and now we see Manahua in a little bit of a tricky situation, to say the least.
Yeah, the reservoir was not exactly threatening here. Without Statuary or Sai, it's not like Don was going off anytime soon. So now Vincent is left with pretty much nothing. Did he keep? No, he didn't keep the second Teferi. So now he doesn't have a draw engine. He has 3 Fogs and nothing to do with them. Because Fog buys a turn, but to do what? To draw another card.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of thing that, in many respects, the same can be said of Time Walk effects, right? That if you play it and you don't have any other action going on, any Planeswalkers in play, any creatures that can be attacking, it's kind of just drawing you a card.
It's a free cycling card. You know Street Wraith, you lose 2 life to draw a card. It's pretty much the same thing, but doesn't cost you life. That's how you see it. Draw a Fog, okay, well, I'll draw again.
All right, so on the other side of things here, Don, this is the point where he really is looking to try and press the advantage that he's gained. Now, we do know that Vincent has a number of Fog effects to work with in these subsequent turns, but he's going to have to really sort of go to work to make sure that he finds something. Fog on its own is not going to be enough to win him this game.
So now, for Vincent to win this game, he would need to draw Teferi right away. However, he already has 2 in the graveyard, so it's going to be pretty hard to come back from this.
So Glintless Crane coming along, could not pick up the Sai Master Thopterist that was seen on top there. A little bit of a shame, because Sai is definitely one of the ways that Don could create a terrifying board very, very quickly indeed. But it does find a Prophetic Prism, and every artifact played here is essentially 2 extra power on the battlefield just because of those constructs.
I don't think this is too relevant at this point. Like,
all right, Fog Effect number 1. In a way, I'd have been tempted to just take that hit because there's only going to be bigger hits coming later.
Yeah. Turbo Fog really has to fog when it's about to die, or to protect the Planeswalkers.
Search for Azcanta coming down here. That one will transform into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin very soon. And Azcanta the Sunken Ruin does do some good work in terms of finding the key cards you need, be they Time Walk effects or indeed more fogs. As things stand, though, Paradoxal Outcome returning 5 permanents will do a pretty excellent job for Don in terms of meaning that he should be able to find everything he needs to be able to close this game out.
Last turn, Vincent could have cycled one of his opponent Haze to find a Teferi, because now he's every turn he passes is potentially
it could be lights out. I mean,
game over.
The fact that this mono blue Storm list does potentially at least have access to counter magic in game 1 means that relying on just the one fog effect may simply not be good enough.
No, he needs to find a win condition here. Another Teferi or because sitting here with 2 fogs is not going to do anything. He doesn't have anything else to protect than his life, but his life is not doing much when he doesn't have a Planeswalker.
All right, so first up we come with Inspiring Statuary. This is the one that means that all of those coloured spells in the mono blue Storm list can get cast a little bit more cheaply thanks to Improvise.
Yeah, we're going to see a big turn here. A Sai to make more tokens, I suppose. Yep. Cast of the Statuary.
Sai Master Thopterist. Every time that you're casting an artifact, you're generating additional Thopters.
So now the fogs are going to be needed, because I think the next attack is going to be lethal. So it's 3, 4, 5 artifacts. He needs 12. Maybe he has another turn.
Potentially, yes. I mean, I guess that we'll find out soon enough. More on the Thopters, generating more Thopter tokens. It's a whole variety of different Thopters here.
7/7.
And of course, with the Inspiring Statuary in play, all of these artifacts that have just been put into play, they have more utility than simply being artifacts that are pumping up those constructs. They can potentially also help cast other spells more cheaply. There's a Renegade map.
Do you have another mana somewhere?
Yeah, I think that he...
Okay. 9/9s?
I'm not sure if he tapped a
No,
land for
no,
that one.
yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, he was 1 short. He's going to be 1 artifact short of lethal this turn.
What a funny situation that would be the case, even after having returned so many artifacts to his hand.
Well, unless... Oh, as he...
Has Karn been
No, he
activated
hasn't
yet?
used Karn, so he should be fine.
All right,
He
so
needs to play another one?
this is the point where the Turbo Fog deck wants to start using its fogs. It's in check. Every single attack is a lethal one, and that means that these fog effects are required at this point. Just so you know, fog effects, they're all named after the original card Fog, which is prevent all combat damage that will be dealt this combat phase. And Don Van Ravensway, he's in the enviable position of having to discard at the end of turn through having drawn so many cards. There we see the original Fog. It's not actually in this deck, but there are various variations on it.
Oh, that would be so good in this deck.
Being able to cast it for just a single green
yeah.
mana. Whew.
Actually, that wasn't even lethal last turn. It was only 18 damage.
Yeah, Haze of Pollen.
No, 20. That was 20 damage.
It's still no mean feat attacking for 20 with these constructs.
As long as you have 1 life, you're still alive. You don't need to fog if you have 1 life left.
Yeah, this is not the kind of deck that has a cheeky burn spell to finish things off.
No Psionic Blast or anything like that.
So it would seem. So Khan there didn't have enough loyalty to generate any more constructs, so for now just drawing Don extra cards. And at this point, if you're Van Ravensway, it's just a matter of double check to make sure that each attack's going to be lethal. And once you know that that's the case, there's not really a huge impetus to put more permanents on the battlefield, I wouldn't imagine.
I think at this point you go look for the
Flux Reservoir?
Yeah. I don't know how many he's playing because he already has a card in play. And usually these lists, they play a mix of Karn and Reservoir. So you can't really have 3 and 3. But could be 3 and 2. 3 Reservoirs and 2 Karns.
We'll see if we can have a little look through here. We do have access to a few lists. And yeah, it looks like it is, as you mentioned, not the full 4.
Only 2?
So here comes a big Baral's Expertise, allowing a Prophetic Prison to be bounced and replayed.
At this point, if you want to find the Reservoir, you probably want to play the Crane first.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to find, you have 4 cards to find it. And then you play Baral's Expertise to play the Reservoir from your hand. So to make it cost like 2 instead of 4. So you pay 2 blue and tap 3 artifacts with Improvise from the Statuary to cast your Baral's Expertise. And then with the free spell you can cast off your Expertise, you play your Reservoir.
Makes sense to me. As things stand, Vincent here pretty much living off the top of his deck, obviously aided a little bit by the fact that there's Search for Azcanta going on as well. It will be transforming this turn. Nissa getting put away. So there is a Fog available to Vincent already. He's got a land that he can cycle away here. And he has Azcanta, the Sunken Ruin. At this point, I'm not quite clear on what his likelihood to be able to get through this is. It seems to me like because he's got so few cards in hand, it might take him a while to kind of catch back up.
Azcanta might help him to catch up, but it's just too late. Don has 7 cards in hand, access to another Paradoxical Outcome. So if he needs another Metallic Rebuke, he can probably just find it.
And if this is a Metallic Rebuke, then it's going to have to be the Azcanta that is needed to get this going, or I guess maybe the cycle.
No, Vincent can pay for a Metallic Rebuke.
So a big Paradoxical Outcome coming in response here.
And Vincent can find a Commit Memory to counter the Fog. So the interesting thing here is that if Don finds a Commit Memory and counters the Haze of Pollen, Vincent can activate Azcanta, find Haze of Pollen,
find the same one again. Nice.
and play it on the same turn. But the thing he doesn't know is that Don has a Metallic Rebuke for it again. So that's probably what we're going to see. I don't know if Vincent will see the play, but that's...
So big Paradoxical Outcome. Just a straightforward Metallic Rebuke here, and there is the mana to pay for this. Though I guess even just forcing this tapping down low. Oh, a second Metallic Rebuke.
You have a third one.
I'm not quite sure what Vincent's hoping to draw here. If there are 3, then that's going to be enough. There's the Commit to Memory.
Yeah. And the attack is lethal.
All right, so that's our game 1. It took a little bit of time for Don to piece together everything that he needed to be able to get that game 1 victory, but he was able to get there. A little bit of work, but ultimately, if I had to piece together the biggest concern for Vincent there, it was his timing of when he was using his fogs. He let himself lose 2 planeswalkers by not playing a fog and instead using counter magic, and then later on used a fog for a non-lethal attack. He could have had a couple of extra turns there without having even to think about casting a card that says take an extra turn.
I thought he was actually in good shape, but then this deck needs a lot of games to know how to play.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks easy on paper. You play your Planeswalkers, you fog, and then you play extra turns. It's not that easy because the sequence of how you play your spells, you have a lot of interactions that are not intuitive, really. The upkeep fog, the how you protect your planeswalkers, which planeswalker you have to play first, when to keep your draw spells, when to cycle. There are a lot of things. If you haven't played this deck a million games before, you will make mistakes.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of one of the interesting bits for me, looking at the way that the Turbo Fog deck did at the Pro Tour and the sort of the hype for it as we go into this GP. The players that were playing this deck at the Pro Tour, firstly, very, very good pros that are just among the better players that you might ever find yourself playing against. On top of that, chances are they'll have got in quite a few reps with the deck before they showed up at the Pro Tour with it. So in addition to both those things, they were playing against players who potentially might not have known a huge amount about the deck. Now that we get to the GP level, firstly, some of these players may not have had the opportunity to play with it quite as much. They might not have quite as many pro points or tournament experience under their belt. But also, the people that they're playing against, if they've done any preparation for this event at all, one would hope have at least seen sort of the stock lists of this this particular deck and come up with some vague sort of a plan for how they might beat it. So a tougher environment for Turbo Fog here in Brussels, maybe than you might even have seen at the Pro Tour, just because of the change in the information advantages.
Well, people were excited to see a new deck.
Yes.
So it got a lot of hype. It's a funky deck because, well, there are cards that you haven't necessarily seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
In other decks.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well because I was talking to Rich before the start of this event, and he referred to it as maybe this is one of the 2 weekends that happen every 5 years or so where Turbo Fog is an amazing deck, because it's the sort of thing that very, very occasionally there will be a deck that is very single-mindedly trying to stop aggro decks, often involving casting lots of fogs, and it ends up kind of having a brief window where it can be very good. But as metagames move around, if it ends up that there are more control decks, it can kind of fall back down again. I mean, something like the Owling Mine deck from
Hawaii 2005.
Yeah, that was a deck.
Six.
That was a deck that was pretty fantastic against one section of the metagame, but couldn't beat various of the other decks.
Yeah, I agree to a certain degree, because actually control decks are pretty good for Turbo Fog.
Interesting.
Aggro decks you're a little favorable. You're a little favorite in these matchups because when you're facing the super aggro draw from the red-black player or the green player, you need to find your combo really fast. You need a Teferi on turn 4 or 5 and a fog to protect it. You don't have the luxury to not draw your fog. If you don't draw your fog, it's not like other control decks when you don't have your removal. You can wait another turn because you're gonna survive because you killed one of your opponent's creatures and you're gonna stabilize on 2 or 4 life. If you don't have the fog, you're dead. That's as simple as that. If you don't assemble your combo by turn 5 or 6, the combo being Teferi Fog, it's not too much, but sometimes you don't have it, and you just die. Against control, it's a different it's a different game.
Yes.
You have more time, you can assemble more things. Nexus of Fate you can play at the end of turn, so you can have more space to wiggle around. And actually I found that control was, at least after board, Game 1, if they don't know what you're doing, which was the case at the Pro Tour, it was pretty easy. They would counter anything that would make card advantage, which is good for you because you don't have that many action spells. But after board, you have a lot of options as well. So I found it easier against control. Against aggro, it's a little better than the coin flip, better than 50-50. But still, you're not happy when they start with Bomat, attack with 3/2 haste on turn 3, and Hazoret on turn 4. Because you need your cards. If you don't have them, doesn't matter how good your matchup is, you're just dead.
So yeah, we're going to see some exciting games if that's the case over the course of this weekend, because I'd be stunned if there weren't players that had gone, well, my red-black aggro deck was good 3 weeks ago, why would it not be good now? Don Van Ravenswire here, we see him just resolving his mulligan. There's an Efflux Reservoir on the top of his deck, and he chooses to send it to the bottom here in this game too. Sideboarding will have happened now, so likely that there will have been some spot adjustments on both sides here to try and make the matchup a little better. And early doors here, we see a lot of blue interaction available to Vincent, but he's played a green-white land to begin with, so very nearly left himself without a way of interacting had he played another green-white land on turn 2. Cagey early turns here as both players just playing out lands. And the first action here, an inspiring statue. You can see here Don Van Raven's why. He's holding it just above the battlefield. He knows there's a good chance of that one getting countered, and it does get hit by a negate. Now, I'm intrigued as to the exact configuration of Don's deck after sideboarding, whether or not it'll still feel like kind of a combo deck, or if it's going to try and play a more controlling game, because I would guess that the Fog deck after sideboarding can try and be pretty controlling too.
It usually has more than 6 counter spells in the form of Negate and Jace's Defeat. And there's a Nexus of Fate in Vincent's hand.
Yeah, the Nexus of Fate, the fact that you can cast it at instant speed, something that is pretty unusual for a Time Walk effect. Typically they do end up being sorceries, but it lets you open up some kind of cool plays.
I like passing here from Vincent's side. You want to protect your Teferi with a counter spell. Ooh, that's a nice one. Nizal, Primal Tide.
Yeah, that's a card that I know that a lot of Turbo Fog players have been looking to for their sideboards against control and potentially against the mirror as well, just as being a gigantic monster that can potentially provide a different line of attack, and uncounterably so. So Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot, that one a fairly safe one to let resolve. It's effectively cycling for now, and there's not the black mana to be able to get it out of play.
To Vincent's defense, game 1 against Storm is pretty hard.
I can believe it. I'm happy to be sat here commentating on it rather than having to figure out the lines myself.
Alright, so now Vincent can play Nizal, which is a good play, or just pass and play Nexus of Fate. End of turn, I'll play Teferi. I think Nizal would have been a little better here, because it's not like it can be countered, and Dawn does not have the mana for Commit Memory. The only card that can efficiently counter Nizal, at least delay it.
So Jace's Defeat getting hit by a second negate here from Manahawa here. Teferi ticking up. Pretty much the default use for Teferi a large proportion of the time, and untapping a couple of lands means that there's every potential for still more counter magic from the Turbo Fog side of the table here.
I like Nizal because it provides a clock.
Yes.
Like right now, if Vincent had Nizal, that would put Don on the defense right away. He had to go off, and with Nizal it's pretty hard because, well, Vincent would have done a lot of cards and potentially more counter magics.
Yeah, the Primal Tide is certainly one that will take games down relatively quickly here, and Don really hasn't achieved a whole lot in these early turns of the game here. He's attempted some counter magic, that didn't work out. He's attempted an Inspiring Statuary, likewise stopped by counter magic from Manahua here. Tough old spot.
So in this matchup, the thing is, Turbo Fog is going to achieve card advantage. It has Teferi, Karn, Search for Azcanta, while Storm only has Sai and Paradoxical Outcome. In the long game, if Storm does not have ways to pressure Turbo Fog, it will not win the match. That's how the perspective of the game goes.
Well, we're hitting our second game here, and I think we might finally get a chance to see our first Nexus of Fate cast. No extra turns taken by Turbo Fog in game 1, but there are a couple of copies of Nexus of Fate in hand now for the Turbo Fog list. And given that Sai Master Thopterist is on the battlefield, there is the potential for some frustrating attacks from Don in this very next few turns.
I think I would still play Nizal here, just to have another draw engine.
And I guess that it also makes your Nexus of Fate that much better. We were talking about how a large proportion of the time Nexus of Fate isn't doing a crazy amount on each successive turn. But Van's not here. He's playing a cagey game. He's cycling his lands. He's going to get to untap a couple of lands here anyway, so he is going to be taking an extra turn.
So that play here, he could have done the other way around, especially since he has a negate in hand. He could have played end of turn, Teferi's triggers on the stack, take 7 mana, and tap 2 lands, play Nexus of Fate, and have the negate backup for his opponent's negate.
Yeah, he ended up walking into a negate here that he didn't need to. That's potentially going to be very costly here because it could work out that this Teferi in a little bit of trouble. It's going to be tough for Don to find all of the damage that he needs to kill it off, but anytime that an Nexus of Fate gets countered while you have counter magic in hand, you have to sit back and wonder whether or not your sequencing had worked out as well as it could have.
Cycling the land was a little, was not needed.
Yeah, I guess that with these Turbo Fog decks, there are plenty of moments that you can feel unassailable if you've got counter magic, if you've got fogs, etc. But recognizing when you're being a little greedy and stopping to think about it, an important piece of the puzzle if you want to win every single match.
I understand why he did it, because he didn't want to waste the extra 2 mana, but he wouldn't have wasted them anyway.
So, Renegade map.
Well, he's still in a good spot, but he's giving a lot of.
There are more chances for Don to be able to get out of this lock than perhaps he might have gotten against a different opponent. Let's go with it that way. So here we can see the power of Inspiring Statuary, meaning that casting Paradoxical Outcome, very straightforward indeed.
It's only for 3 cards. It's not too bad yet. And he doesn't have mana available to play Buried Expertise and go off.
Yeah, though, I mean, the additional cards drawn, there will also be additional Thopters generated when most of those cards get played. So it's certainly worth doing. It's just a matter of, in the grand scheme of things, I've seen scarier Paradoxical Outcomes.
Yeah. The Storm deck has a lot of useless cards as well. I mean, drawing Ornithopters and Renegade maps in a match where your opponent plays Teferi and Time Walks.
Yeah, the power levels are just not the same fundamentally.
When you draw 3 cards and you have map, Ornithopter, and land, I mean, it could be better.
A sad little attack there on Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Not enough to deal with the Planeswalker. And honestly, the only time that you see a minus ability on Teferi in this sort of a matchup is if Teferi happens to go ultimate. And at that point, the game's pretty much over anyway.
All right, let's see if that happens differently this time. I mean, Nezal should have been in play already, and now it's stuck in hand, and it's...
There's not an obvious time to deploy Nezahal at this point.
Not anymore. Now, the problem is he can't play Nezal and have Fog and counter backup. He would be short 1 mana. He can Time Walk this turn, which would not do that much. All right. So this time, 2 mana floating. 7 mana, yep. Nexus of Fate.
So Nexus of Fate getting shuffled back in there. For those of you wondering why it is that Nexus of Fate looks suspiciously like a mountain, because Nexus of Fate only printed in foil, the judges have requested that if players are concerned that the foil card might be distinguishable from the rest of the deck, if it's the only foil in the deck, maybe through having a little bit of a bend in it or whatever, that there are official judge-sanctioned proxies in the deck. They've got the name, the casting cost, and so on written on them, that those go in place, and as soon as you cast it, you just reveal that you actually have the Nexus of Fate available to you. Conveniently mounting a card very rarely seen alongside Nexus of Fate in this standard format, though I'm sure if someone showed up with a red-blue Nexus of Fate deck, then they might reasonably be able to request a different land for that proxy.
I can tell you there will be Nexus of Fate next to mountains in the near future. Ooh,
some cheeky brews being worked on by our Hall of Famer. Search for Ice-Canter coming down by Vincent here. Search for Ice-Canter, another card that works pretty spectacularly well with Teferi, and I think there's an argument to say that this Turbo Fog deck could equally just be called Turbo Teferi, between what it's doing with Nexus of Fate and Search for Ice-Canter. Reclamation Sage coming down to deal with Inspiring Statuary. That, yes, the Inspiring Statuary does power up a lot of Don Van Ravenway's draws, but in some respects, kind of a cherry on top for Vincent rather than the main thing that he's doing here.
It's an interesting sideboard card, to say the least, because there are other cards against Storm and against artifacts, that might be a little more efficient.
I guess that when you're building your sideboard, you're trying to give it sort of the best varied options that you can, and maybe, at least for Vincent, he felt like having access to the creature was going to be helpful.
Yeah, Manglehorn, if you're looking for a creature that oozes Storm, Manglehorn is much more.
Oh yeah, making
powerful.
sure those artifacts come into play tapped.
Yeah.
Against an inspiring statuary draw, I can certainly see how that's very powerful.
And now Vincent's in a tough spot because he only has one fog and one negate. And the rest is not doing that much. He will need to... he won't need to fog this turn to break his Teferi, but... he can chump the Sai and let the 5 Thopters till 5 to Teferi. But does he want to counter Statuary?
Yeah, it's a little question mark. The statuary comes down, and it does represent potentially a lot of extra mana here, given all of those Thopters in play.
But to do what?
Well, I guess we'll find out, because we are seeing some artifacts get tapped here, including the statuary itself. Here comes Tezzeret.
Yeah, it's probably a counter for this one. That's one of the ways Don can achieve card advantage. Sai can do that, but it's not very mana efficient.
Yeah, Tezzeret, Artifice Master, certainly a card that can cause a little bit of trouble in these Planeswalker battles.
It's a better Teferi here.
Yeah.
Just 2 cards. Teferi only draws 1.
And as things stand, Renegade map coming down as well here. Zero, draw 2 cards. Pretty potent.
There's another little detail in that game that might come up.
Yeah.
There's only 13 minutes left.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Game 1, it didn't feel like it was going that slowly, but... So here's another fog effect. I can see, Raph, you're not too happy with that one.
Yeah, there's no reason to fog here. He would not kill Teferi. He can, unless he wants to use the -3 on Tezzeret, but I don't think that's what he wants to do here. He could have just chumped the Sai with the 2-1. The 2-1 isn't doing anything.
I guess if he wants an extra card in the graveyard to transform his Search for Azcanta, but even that seems a little tenuous. Here comes Nazahal. Teferi ticking up. There we can see Nezahal Primal Tide. Can't be countered, no maximum hand size. Whenever your opponent casts a non-creature spell, draw a card. Certainly relevant in this matchup. And then this is one of the reasons that it can be so difficult to actually deal with this monster. Discard 3 cards to exile it, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step.
Is it looking like a turtle? I never actually paid attention to the back. At least the mob, not the actual body. Is that like a turtle? Turtle shaped?
Well, it's kind of a swimming dino.
Oh, okay. Could be a shell.
An Elder Dino. It's not just a format with Elder Dragons anymore. We have Elder Dinosaurs as well. All right, so Don Van Ravensway, he's got a lot of action on his side of the battlefield, it must be said. Whether or not it's going to ultimately prove relevant, we will find out soon enough.
I like Don's chances here with drawing 2 cards a turn from Tezzeret. He now has access to a lot of mana if he wants to start using Sai.
It looks like Vincent may have slightly underpaid for that Nezahal Primal Tide, and he has got a warning for that. Meanwhile, Don just needs to figure out what to do with his turn. I mean, speaking to the clock here, Raph, we're a little bit under 11 minutes left on the round. Turbo Fog a game down. Even if Vincent wins this game, how easily can a Turbo Fog player actually win games quickly?
The thing is, when you start going off, you get the extra turns yourself.
I suppose, yeah.
So in the worst case, you counter draw.
I see, yeah. I guess that, yeah, even if the game goes to extra turns, there's a potential that all 5 of those extra turns
Yeah.
could be taken on one side of the table, right?
There are fast kills with Turbo Fog that you can achieve within the 5 turns.
Mm-hmm.
That involves Nissa. I don't know how many Nissa Vincent is running. Anticipate, but he's not running Anticipate. And like 10 lands.
Interesting.
So you can Nissa, Ultimate Nissa with 7 counters. Take out 6 counters.
Okay, so here we see a fog effect being countered by a negate. That negate is itself going to get countered, so the fog may well still resolve, but all of this is churning through what Vincent has going on here. He's having to rely on the fact that Nezahal's drawing him extra cards here.
Did you draw from the negate?
He did. Now if you're Don here, you've got paradoxical outcome. There's a temptation, I presume, to dig a little deeper. Doesn't go with it, though. Lots of copies of paradoxical outcome are available to Don here if he wants them.
So I think now it's time to try to go off when Vincent is tapped out.
Absolutely. Kicking things off with a Metal Spinners Puzzle Knot. Everyone gets to draw a card. It costs Don a life, but I don't think he's going to mind too much. Thus far, the only damage he's taken in this match has been from his own copies of Metal Spinners Puzzle Knot.
Yeah, it's very relevant detail here. Thanks, Tim.
Bringing you all the details here from Grand Prix Brussels.
Huh. Yeah, I think he's digging for a Mox here, so he can more easily pay for his paradoxical outcomes.
Yeah, Mox Amber probably at its best, at least for standard in this mono blue storm list, because even if you don't have a legend in play, Inspiring Statuary means that you are sometimes getting value out of the Mox, just being able to tap it to improvise, if not for regular mana. But Don having to pass things back there, just choosing to keep mana open.
Oh, here comes a Nissa.
Nissa will certainly help, and a transformed Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, also a pretty helpful addition to the battlefield for Vincent here. Immediately goes a digging. Aggressive.
There's no Nexus of Fate here.
I mean, another Haze of Pollen, not the worst. Draws with Teferi, and he will get a chance to untap his Azcanta as well.
Gift of Paradise would actually only cost 1 here.
Yeah?
3, but then you untap the land.
Yeah, it's a nice interaction, that one.
Yeah. So you pay 3 for the enchant, the aura, put on the land. So you, during the end step, you take 2 mana, you untap. So you got one free mana of the land, and then if you tap it again, you have 1 other mana. So you basically pay 3 to get 2 mana back.
Well, Vincent seems intent on digging. He's gone for a Charter Course here to draw 2 and discard 1. He's not interested in attacking just yet.
Yeah, attacking is not exactly super efficient here. Nizal is just another Planeswalker here. He just draws you cards.
I'm interested about the attack immediately after a Charter Course here. Don there blocking and sacrificing to draw a card thanks to Sai Master Thopterist's ability. A little over 6 minutes left on this clock. It's almost as if, at least on Vincent's side of the battlefield, he's not really thinking about that so much as just navigating his way through this specific game.
Yeah, it was a strange block here from Don. He could have blocked just with Thopter instead of an Ornithopter. Ornithopter is 1 less power, but it's a permanent that comes back in your hand.
And we know that there's paradoxical outcome
very
in
relevant
his
with paradoxical outcome, especially since it doesn't actually have that many permanents it can bounce back.
Yeah, it's a busy board, but much of that busyness is all of these Thopter tokens generated by Sai. Both these players just drawing so many cards thanks to their respective Planeswalkers.
Ooh. Unwind.
I like that one.
I like this one.
Yeah, one of the slightly more esoteric choices, but this is why we love watching especially post-sideboard games, is people bringing their own little flavor to matchups.
I had them in my first version of Storm, but I had to cut them because I never had any enough room. But when you start going off, it actually gives you mana. You
That's nice.
You get the extra blue mana. Yeah, you play an irrelevant spell. You pay 1 blue, tap 2 Thopters, and then tap 3 blue.
Oh, I like that.
So you get the blue mana you're missing.
Oh, I like that quite a bit. As things stand, it may be that he's got more important things to counter in this matchup. The Turbo not feeling very apt in terms of the titling for Turbo Fog, at least in this round. The original Turbo list, I think, was Turbo Stasis. Deep cut there, very long time ago.
Long ago.
Matt Place and Mike Long making their way onto the US Nationals team in all of 1995, I think it was, with Turbo Stasis, drawing extra cards with Howling Mine to keep their stasis in play.
Yes. This is where the question, anticipate or Charted Course in Turbo Fog. Do you like? I like Anticipate better. They like Charted Course better. Charted Course helps to flip Escanta. But Anticipate here, if nothing happens, end of turn, Anticipate, find a Fog. That's just a lot more mana efficient.
So here comes Khan Sinoverza. Khan will be a big deal on this battlefield because so many artifacts already in play that it will mean that constructs will be gigantic.
Another instant?
Worth noting, of course, that Nezahal also means that there's no maximum hand size for Manahua here. So drawing all these extra cards coming at relatively low cost. He's unlikely to get decked, given the fact that there's Nexus of Fate in his deck. And as so frequently the case, when Khan ticks up, Khan finds another Khan.
Actually, the only way you can get decked with Nexus of Fate in your deck is when you don't have any hand size limit.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fair point.
So there's a way you can lose with Nexus of Fate. This was Nizal.
Though I guess that each turn you can at least try casting it and hope that works out.
If you forget to cast them,
I mean,
stuck with them in your hand.
There's a lot of games that you can lose if you start forgetting to do things, Raf.
No, but the thing is...
No, I understand.
If, for example, Dawn goes off and plays a bunch of spells, I don't think Nizal is a May ability. You have to draw.
Oh, really?
So if you're tapped out with Nexus of Fate in your hand, well, you're gonna be decked. And
interesting.
And if you can't cast it.
It's a pretty nuanced line to win the game. As things stand, Don Van Rosenway, he's up a game. There's 2 minutes, 20-odd seconds left on the clock. And I don't think he's in terrible shape in this game, to be perfectly honest.
I think with more time, Vincent is winning this game 100%. But I don't know, because now he'll have to... there's a long way for him to actually win the game, because there's a lot of blockers on Don's side. So we'll have to time walk a couple times to have Nissa attack for enough damage. And I don't think he's running Oath of Teferi, so we'll have to up the Nissa quite a few turns in a row.
So paradoxical outcome here in response to this Haze of Pollen. That meets Jace's defeat. But I think we might see some more action before this Haze of Pollen finally resolves here.
Oh, yeah, there are quite a few things here. Unwind, Commit Memory.
Yeah, at this point, getting Vincent low on mana is no mean feat because he has a lot of lands in play, but it looks like that's exactly what Don's been able to achieve here.
Are they all taking Teferi? But they're only 6, right?
Yeah.
So
unless there's a construct lurking somewhere in that pile that I've not spotted this.
What's the construct?
No.
Oh, no, there's no construct. He just +1.
Yeah, he drew cards.
Yeah. So actually, it's fine. I mean, I would not fight over it if it's only 6. And no draw from the Nizal. This one is very hard to remember every time.
Yeah.
You know it draws you card, but it draws you so many cards that sometimes you just miss it. Just miss the trigger.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened. 20 seconds and 5 extra turns. That's gonna be tough for Vincent to actually win. I think he has this game locked, but it's gonna be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's one of the other things that is pertinent to playing this deck is being able to go through the motions of the easy turns quickly. Obviously, every now and again you'll get a difficult turn. It's worth spending the time when things are complicated, but if the turn that you're playing is one of the turns that's pretty scripted, make sure you get through that good and quick.
So the main practice with this deck is to take the deck and play like 2 or 3 hours of Goldfish. That's what we did at the house before the Pro Tour.
I heard of players prepping for the Pro Tour. I think it was Ben Rubin literally practicing with a stopwatch next to him so that he could see the clock ticking up as he was trying to just make his way through his turns. Ben known for being a pretty deliberate player. This not known for being a deck you can afford to be slow with.
Deliberate as in slow?
Just slow. Yeah. It's just a longer word for slow. I'm going for my 10-cent words
We like Ben, but he's very slow.
So a big attack here coming from Nezahal. Why not? Side jumps in the way.
Another Nexus of Fate.
Well, I mean, if there's 5 extra turns, it may well be that they're all going to be taken on one side of the table.
The good thing is Don tapped out. He doesn't have any blocker. So Nizal might actually just go all the way.
7/7/7?
Yeah. Does he have any counter left? In his hand. Does Vincent have any counter left?
I guess that we'll find out.
I guess not. He doesn't have any counter left.
All right. So let's start taking some extra turns here.
Yeah, but then Don has counters.
Yeah, commit to memory here. If it works out that there was an appropriate counter for 2 mana, then again that charter course looks pretty greedy, shall we say?
He had Supreme Will, but then did he have enough mana to do everything this turn?
I do not believe so. So that die that we see at the top of the screen there, that just indicates how many turns there are left.
He used the Scanta this turn. He already had a Nexus.
Yeah, I think that there was no small amount of greed on Vincent's part here to try and get things going. And the fact that now that Don's been able to untap with all of those creatures means that these 5 turns, it's going to be pretty tough for the Turbo Fog player
and
to
he tapped
close it out.
And he tapped out as well. So now if Don can go off.
Yeah, there's still a potential for that. I mean, a paradoxical outcome here could set it all up.
Actually, he might try to deck him.
That'd be cool. I would be all right with that.
That's a possibility. I mean, it might not happen because it's a lot of cards, but how many cards in Vincent's deck?
I think it's fair to say that if we had to pick 2 decks to watch in extra turns, these are some of the more explosive decks that can do cool things with 5 turns to work with.
I think it's like less than 25 cards in Vincent's deck, so playing 25 spells is tough, but it's not impossible. Well, if you have a Reservoir, you don't have to. Oh, well, never mind.
Well, commit to memory changes that equation just a little bit.
Yeah, well, now there's a little more cards in Vincent's deck. Forget about my plan.
New plan.
I like that plan, though.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, we can't see exactly what Dom was working with there. But the fact that he's now got a Mox Amber, he's going to be drawing 7 cards. He's got a whole ton of artifacts. There is an Inspiring Statuary around here. There's a lot of different ways that he could potentially close this game out on this exact turn.
I think he had more chances with the hand he had.
Really?
Yeah. Because the outcome was a lot of cards.
I mean, I guess that the other way of looking at it is he's a game up. There are 4 turns left on this game after this one.
I don't think that changes anything. I think he had a good chance of winning that game with the hand he had. It wouldn't have actually cost him that much to play the outcome before, because he would have just tapped the Mox and 3 Thopters. All
right, so here we see Tezzeret drawing a couple of additional cards for Don here.
There was also an Orange Thopter, so you wouldn't even have had to tap that many Thopters. And the thing is with Storm, sometimes you play Memory and you don't get anything. And you don't have any action spells.
it can definitely happen. Inventor's Fair there coming down for Don Van Ravensway.
Yeah, especially since he boarded in a lot of counter spells. If you draw a bunch of counter spells, lands, and useless artifacts, then your memory just efficiently gives your opponent 7 new cards.
Yeah, I mean,
And with Nizal,
that's the reason that when people talk about the Power 9, it almost feels like there's an asterisk next to Time Twister these days, is that giving your opponent 7 cards doesn't feel that great. Like, yes, you're the person that first gets access to those 7, but that might just not be good enough.
was it downgraded now? Is it still in the Power 9?
Oh, it's still there. It's just,
It's Soul Ring past.
It's lurking at the bottom of the table.
Is it in the 10 now? Power 9 is all the Moxes, Black Lotus, Time Walk, Ancestral Recall, and Soul Ring. And Time Twister is like 10.
Time Twister's still pretty cool. I own a Time Twister, so I like to still...
Lish is pretty cool. It's not in the Power 9. Cool is not really...
All right, fair enough. It's still in my Power 9. Let's go with that. So, Vincent Manohua may have dodged a bullet there as he was successfully able to not die in that last turn, thanks to Don not finding a way to achieve it. And he again is aggressively using this as counter. I mean, if he's going to end up tapped out, this is how it happens. He does not have a Nexus of Fate in hand, but he does see one off as counter the Sunken Ruin here. And taking extra turns while you are in extra turns of the match.
Yep.
It's pretty good because it
takes away the extra turn from your opponent.
Yes.
Unless you only take one. It might just... it takes your turn, your last turn away from yourself.
Yes. The extra turns that you get with something like Nexus of Fate, you basically get to use more of the 5 additional turns. That's what I'm trying to articulate there. There we go. We finally managed to find a way of getting that one nice and clear. But as things stand, the best that Vincent can achieve in this match at this point is a draw. So a Nexus of Fate getting cast here. And here's a Metallic Rebuke. And look how much mana is available to Vincent.
0.
Absolutely 0. Once again, he finds himself not resolving his big Time Walk and passing the turn with all of his mana tapped.
Yeah, he's not going to untap here. With Don using his Inventor's Sphere to find a reservoir, it's likely to be the last turn.
Yeah, Inventor's Sphere for Aetherflux Reservoir. That reservoir, 4 mana, artifact. It's going to mean that each spell that gets cast by Don is gaining him successively more and more life. Once he goes up to above 50 life, well, he can just close this game out with direct damage. Even if there were somehow a fog, it wouldn't be good enough. And he doesn't even need to do quite as much damage, potentially, if he can just get attacks in. But attacks are going to be so much worse than this reservoir.
No, I think he can... Can't he just attack for the win here?
He does have a construct in play,
he has a construct. He needs to get rid of the blockers. Yeah, well, that's easier said than done. He needs a Baral's expertise. But how many does he have to board? That's the question. I mean, Baral's expertise is not very good against Fog. You have nothing to bounce. You can't bounce the Fairy. You can't bounce the enchantments. The only thing you can bounce is, Reclamation Sage.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Raf, and say that we might not get to our Time Walk match in round 2 here at Grand Prix Brussels. In third turn of extra turns, I can't imagine there's a great many matches out on the floor going on. We'll find out soon enough.
I mean, we are watching a Time Walk match, kind of.
We really are.
Yeah.
We started in Time Walk mode, and we have continued in that mode for the entirety of the round.
Well, we haven't seen any actual Time Walk, but Nexus of Fate is close enough.
Nexus of Fate is a very powerful card, and I'm pretty excited to see what it can do in this standard format. It definitely adds a different line of attack. All right, step 1, get our Aetherflux Reservoir down. And now Neil Rigby doing our life totals down there is going to have a little bit more work to do, because each and every time that a spell gets cast, that will mean successively more life for Don. If we were doing cards in hand, it would be getting very complicated, because everyone gets to draw a whole bunch of cards when that Prophetic Prism gets cast.
Draw.
Ornithopter, that works out all right when you've got the old Aetherflux Reservoir in play.
Yeah, this is statuary somewhere.
There is.
Under the and there's I don't remember what was under the reservoir. Is that another puzzle lot? We saw it half a second ago, but that was. It's now hidden by the reservoir.
As it turns out, when the mono blue storm deck's going off, there aren't any tables big enough. We need to be able to zoom out on our camera if we want to be able to fit everything into
I think
the shots.
he drew off the Ornithopter, and you can't do that. I don't think it's very relevant at this point in the game, but I think when Don played Ornithopter, Vincent just drew a card off the Nizal. I'm not sure. I think that's what I saw.
Renegade map does let you draw. Ultimately, I'm hoping that Don just gets to close the game out here with his Aetherflux Reservoir, just to mean that we can be sure we got a nice clean game here.
Yeah, and he has 2 sides. I don't know which. Oh man, is that not enough? So then, then Vincent might have drawn an extra card. Huh. So he doesn't manage to close this game.
Has to just pass things back.
Didn't he have enough? Which spell was it? So he could have cast 2 size extra. Metallic Rebuke. A card for free. I think that was enough. I think he had enough to win this turn.
Yeah, that Mox Amber's active, so there's
he has
3 blue mana available plus a ton of colorless mana for
yeah,
colored spells.
And he could play the Rebuke at the end. There's a trick when you play the last spell, and you have Reservoir on the stack, and you Metallic Rebuke the spell you just played. You have Reservoir on the stack.
Yep.
So instead of gaining, for example, if it's the 5th and 6th spell, you gain 6 and 6 instead of 5 and 5 and 6.
Oh, interesting. And as things stand here, Vincent has cast a Nexus of Fate, meaning that he's going to be taking both turn 4 and turn 5.
But this point doesn't really matter since he's not going to instant win.
No.
It's not like a combo deck when you start going off and you win on the same turn. This time it's a little more trickier.
And there's the handshake. A little smile from Don Van Ravensway. Strange match that we saw there, as it was ultimately Don Van Ravensway winning 1-0 in extra turns, and extra turns in a whole bunch of different ways achieved there by these various players. Don Van Ravensway doing it the old-fashioned way, just by having a game going super duper 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 long, and on the other side of things, well, taking some extra turns with some cards that allow you extra turns. We will have more magic for you, though, from Grand Prix Brussels soon, right after these messages.
Welcome back to the tournament floor here at GP Brussels, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Riley Knight, joined by the Pro Tour champion Simon Goertzen, as usual. Now, there's some good news and some bad news. Some bad news is out on the floor, there has been a 15-minute delay to one of the games there. So we've got a long judge call involved, which means that we are running a little bit behind schedule. The good news, however, is we've got Time Walk Magic to bring you before we get underway with round number 3. So let's get things kicked off now with Hans Schrijvers and Jori Hooker. We've got Hour of Promise against Mono Blue Storm. Hour of Promise is a card that we see here, there, and everywhere. Well, maybe not everywhere. Here, there, and some places, Simon.
Sometimes when players do want to ramp, and really interesting decks that come out of it. I really like the Hour of Promise style decks.
Hour of Promise had a brief, very brief career in Modern, in Scapeshift here. But it looks like right now Schrijvers is doing what he can with the list. A number of utility lands, if near dead lands, Field of Ruin. Of course, Hour of Promise is able to fetch out any land, not just basics, and for that reason can be very, very powerful indeed.
Fixing his mana basically here.
Yeah, Field of Ruin. Going after that Arch of Erazka. Not necessarily a hugely important threat for him to deal with right now, but finding that green source is going to be, imagine, pretty important with, yes, something like a Gift of Paradise here. I also, Simon, I don't know if you spotted it, as we see a negate deal with the gift there. There's Zakama, Primal Calamity, in Schrijver's hand there.
Schrijver wants to have as much mana as possible, so I understand cornering the Gift of Paradise there just to delay the ramp deck from doing what it wants to do and just hopefully storming off before anything too scary comes down.
Doesn't have an answer to the second one, however, and we see Inspiring Statuary power out Khan, despite the fact that he is, of course, colorless. The Inspiring Statuary only says non-artifact, so you can still play a Khan. It's possible to play a Khan with 0 lands untapped, actually. Here's a second negate for this Never to Return here.
Really nice use of Karn together with Inspiring Statuary. Statuary generated 1 mana for Karn, and the construct of Karn generated 1 mana for the negate.
And this is going to be a huge
Love
play
it.
here. Look at this. 7 mana.
Nexus of Fate in the Mono Blue Storm deck.
Just get it done here. Take an extra turn, especially with an active Planeswalker. That's going to be huge. No attacks now for Hooker, of course, but all the same, untapping with an active Planeswalker, a great thing to do here. See how he wants to spend this turn. Let's go upstairs with Khan, see what's up. Ornithopter or Island?
That's a close one.
The age-old choice, Simon. Looks like it is going to be Island that goes to the hand of Hooker, straight into the battlefield. Couple of paradoxical outcomes in hand for Hooker. Not at their best here. We might see a Psy come down. Yes, indeed. There it is. Love this card. Love this card.
Hooker has all the time in the world. He doesn't need to go off this turn at all.
No. He can wait until the heat death of the universe here is so far ahead. In hand, Inspiring Statuary, double paradoxical outcome, and a mystery card. There might be a Zalfa and Void. See what he wants to do with this Psy as we see another artifact into the frame. That's a nice attack here. Look at that. These guys are 5/5s. That's huge.
Hooker actually tapping out of his blue spells here to get in for damage. I was expecting him to take a more conservative line, but this is actually threatening lethal next turn.
So Schrijver's now hard-pressed to find an answer, even after that Hour of Promise. Gained him some life. Excuse me. Tapping the Hour of Promise. Oh, bleh. Don't like to see that. And here is the Hour of Promise. Sorry, the Gift of Paradise tapping there, I should say. So another desert will be enough here for Schrijvers to gain some chump blockers in the form of 2 zombies. And it looks like, yes, immediately look at that. A Desert of the True brought to the front of the hand.
So Mono Blue Storm can play the Storm combo kill. You can win with Psy. You can win with Karn. And this version even has Nexus of Fate. So this is a deck that has shown quite a lot of ways of winning the game for a combo deck.
Yeah, it's hot. It's really hot. It's a deck that, as I said, Simon, I expect to see really continue to run the tables, and at least until rotation when we lose a lot of these powerful artifacts. But even after that, Psy is just a card that does not muck around.
Hooker is forcing chump blocks here from the ramp deck. That's not something I would have expected.
Grabbing that Ornithopter with the silver counter on it and putting 2 more artifacts into play. Make that 3-4 more artifacts thanks to Mox Amber, which actually taps for mana. In the first time in the history of Magic the Gathering, ladies and gentlemen, Mox Amber tapping for mana. Here's Paradoxical Outcome. Pick up 5 permanents? Yep, and draw 5 cards, and still with a stack of mana available here for Hooker. We're seeing him really go off. Doesn't even need the Aetherflux Reservoir.
There are actually mono blue storm versions without the reservoir.
Yeah, it's not needed. It's a nice little glass cannon, but you can still certainly win without it, and we're seeing here the power of it, thanks again to Inspiring Statuary. Hooker tapped all of the artifacts that he bounced, so his paradoxical outcome cost hardly anything, and we're seeing him gain even more of an air force here, again, thanks to Signmaster Thopterist. This deck was cool before, and I liked it. I like seeing people play with it, play against it. I thought it was a sweet deck. Now, with Sai, this deck's terrifying. It's terrifying, Simon.
It's really powerful now.
Plays 4 copies of this guy, most of them anyway, and as a result, so good on offense, on defense, on locking up the board against mono red, in pressuring the powerful control decks of the format, and a second paradoxical outcome, draw another couple of cards, still nowhere, not even close to being tapped out here, Simon.
Sai also powers up Mox Amber.
Yeah, it finally makes it an actual real-life Mox.
And next is a Fate.
Looking a lot better now that Hooker has effectively unlimited mana. So pop the Nexus of Fate back into the library there.
Yeah, and I was thinking about exactly this. So the reason why the Turbo Folk deck is so good with Nexus of Fate is because it puts down one or more Planeswalkers or a Skanta to really generate more from a single turn than just the mana and the card draw in the draw step. And this mono blue Storm deck is actually doing the same with Karns and all the other things.
And Shriver's just recognizing that the jig is up between this enormous air force that he has there, Simon, and the Karn tokens as well. Too much for Shriver's to overcome, especially with multiple turns.
And it wasn't even close.
Wasn't even close. Wasn't even close. We have seen a lot of mono blue Storm. We've seen a lot of this paradoxical outcome deck in the feature match area so far. And I have to say, we were discussing this off air, Simon. It seems to be a very well-positioned deck for the current standard format.
Yes. What you don't really want to face is mono green, but that is being pushed out of the format by all the other pillars of the format.
Especially the new Nexus of Fate Turbo Fog list.
Yeah. And still, you're not super happy to play against white blue control, for example, and the Chain Rollers kill your line of elves.
Yeah, it's a rough spot. My friends, we're going to take a quick break. On the other side of this, we'll be back with more Magic here from GP Brussels.